Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Today, lawmakers in the Republican-controlled Florida State House passed a bill banning abortion after just 6 weeks of pregnancy, effectively a complete and total ban. The new ban now goes to Governor Ron DeSantis, who is expected to sign it into law, which will make Florida one of the most restrictive states in the union on abortion. And this highlights just how seriously the Republican Party, conservatives, the American right wing, is pursuing its anti-abortion aims, and how key the issue is going to be in the next presidential election. If you want to run for president as a Republican in 2024, and folks are lining up, you need to have an answer to this simple, direct question. Do you support a national ban on abortion? Now, of course, until last summer, a national ban on abortion was impossible, in fact, unconstitutional, because the Supreme Court ruled in Roe v. Wade and affirmed in Casey that the right to an abortion is protected by the Constitution. But the anti-abortion movement, the Republican Party, the American right wing, were successful in taking that away. They got the 3 justices they needed on the court who gutted Roe, overturned it. And ever since the court overturned Roe last June, a national abortion ban has once again become a real live question. We're already seeing Republicans introduce bans in state after state where they have control, now including Florida, some outright, some after a certain length of time, like 6 weeks. On top of that, a potential Republican candidate for president has to deal with the fact that the right-wing position on abortion is politically toxic. And the reason for that is that the fundamental ideological underpinning of the anti-abortion movement is an idea about when life begins that really is quite radical and really isn't shared by most people. This has been the case for decades, all the way back to as long as I can remember my childhood, when my deeply religious, devout Catholic grandparents participated in the March for Life every year. They went to Washington every single year for it, and they believed deeply, genuinely, as people do now, the fundamental ideological commitment of people in the anti-abortion movement, that a fertilized egg is a person, that a fetus is a baby, and abortion is murder. Obviously, if you believe that, as millions do, you believe there should be a national ban on abortion. You can't just let babies get murdered in states that you don't have Republican control of. And this is what many Republican primary voters believe, the people whose votes that you need as a Republican candidate for president. But here's the rub. The overwhelming majority of Americans do not agree at all. 62% say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. That's a 62-38 issue. So a presidential candidate who will need to win over persuadable and swing voters has to figure out, what do you do about this? How do you thread the needle? We are watching a potential candidate attempt that right now. Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina just announced that he is launching an exploratory committee for a presidential run. And surprise, he was immediately asked the all-important, screechingly obvious question, do you support a national ban on abortion?
Your colleague from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, has a bill to limit abortions at 15 weeks, federal restriction. Do you support that measure?
Yeah, so I would say this, that I am certainly 100% pro-life, without any question. I've been very, very clear about that, very consistent about that. I do think we spend not enough time understanding how far the far left has gone on the issue of abortion. The Senate Democrats have voted for late-term abortions well into the 3rd trimester, some even suggesting that we should have abortion up until the day of birth. The fact that we are one of a handful of countries that allows for late-term abortions is a challenging predicament for us to be in.
But in order to solve that, do you think the federal government should be involved with something like what Lindsey Graham is proposing?
Yeah, there's no question that we're going to have lots of folks talk about legislation from a federal perspective. But what I've heard so far and what I've seen in the Senate aren't proposals, but those from the left trying to figure out how to continue their campaign towards late-term abortions, even allowing abortions based on the gender of the child or the race of the child or the disabilities of the child.
But as president, if you were president, would you advocate for federal limits?
Yeah. So once again, I'm 100% pro-life, and I do believe that. No, that's not what I said. I do believe that we should have a robust conversation about what's happening on a very important topic.
So you think we should have important conversations on a very important topic, huh? I mean, that was tough to watch. Now, Senator Tim Scott's answers there were kind of the rhetorical equivalent, and you see this with a lot of Republicans, of watching someone who's not very good at swimming, like a kid who's just learned, desperately flail about in a pool, looking for something to hold on to so they don't drown. And Republican politicians have been trained, right, to look for these kind of different floaties they will cling to in any situation having to do with abortion, right? You just heard Tim Scott grabbing at a bunch of them. I'm pro-life. I make no apologies for being pro-life. I'm pro-life. You hear that all the time. I mean, sure, who's anti-life? The Democrats are so extreme. To be clear, no one's arguing for abortion up to the day of birth. But the point is, you're not going anywhere. You're not getting anything done. You're just thrashing around long enough in the pool, grabbing hold from one thing to the next, these life preservers, with the thought that, like, if you just tread water long enough, that you find a way out of the question. That's not going to work. It's not working for Tim Scott. And I can imagine if you're working for Senator Tim Scott, particularly his exploratory committee, you might have seen that answer and thought, whew, all right, team, we need a huddle on that one. We need an actual answer on the very straightforward, very relevant question of whether he supports, yes or no, a national abortion ban, particularly considering the fact that the senior senator from our home state, South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, has already proposed one. So I assume Tim Scott's team got together, they worked on the game plan. Try it again today.
Would you support a federal ban on abortions?
I would simply say that the fact of the matter is, when you look at the issue of abortion, one of the challenges that we have, we continue to go to the most restrictive conversations without broadening the scope and taking a look at the fact that I'm 100% pro-life. I never walk away from that. But the truth of the matter is that when you look at the issues on abortion, I start with the very important conversation I had in a banking hearing when I was sitting in my office and listening to Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, talk about increasing the labor force participation rate for African-American women who are in poverty by having abortions. I think we're just having the wrong conversation. I ran down to the banking hearing to see if I heard her right. Are you actually saying that a mom like mine should have an abortion so that we increase the labor force participation rate? That just seems ridiculous to me. And so I'm going to continue to have a serious conversation about the issues that affect the American people. I'm going to start by pointing out the absolute hypocrisy of the left on one of the more important issues.
Just total cartoonish flop sweat. I would say this, that I am certainly 100% pro-life without question. I've been very clear about that, very consistent about that. I do not think we should, not enough time understanding how far the left has gone, yada, yada, okay? Honestly, not a lot of improvement there. Maybe even a few steps back. And here's the thing. It's not really Tim Scott's fault. It's not his team's fault. It isn't anyone's fault in particular. From a communications perspective, it's the rotten fruit of a poisoned tree, the wildly extreme ideology that has driven the anti-abortion movement for decades. The folks who have won now, who believe a fertilized egg, those cells inside a woman's body, in a pregnant person's body, at 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, that is as much a person as a living human being. That's the belief. And as a Republican presidential candidate, the people that believe that, those people are your base. Which brings us back to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, another likely Republican candidate for president. He is, too, trying to do what Tim Scott did. He's trying to thread the needle. But he's just sort of going all in, at least action-wise, right? He's signing an extreme, one of the most extreme bans in the country that just passed today. He hasn't signed it yet, but he's going to sign it. If he succeeds in winning the Republican nomination, this bill that he says he will sign, that bans effectively abortion in Florida, this will rightly become a massive political albatross, an obstacle to his desire to become president of the United States. It's not even popular in Florida. In Florida, a majority of adults think abortion should be legal in all or most cases. We saw protests like this erupt today in the Capitol building. There'll be more, I imagine. I'm sure. Well, I suspect that if Ron DeSantis has anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together around him, they understand that signing this bill is, in the grand sense, a political mistake. But in the immediate sense, he's got a primary to win before he can win the general. The only hope for Republicans who want to dodge, who want to yada yada, of course I'm pro-life, but really, have you heard Janet Yellen? The only hope for having their cake and eating it too, right, is that they know they're on the wrong side of this issue. Their hope is that the judiciary can do it for them. If a national abortion were to come through the courts rather than democratic means, they would be saved from having to go on the record. And so they have stacked the federal judiciary with a whole bunch of extremists who share the views of the right-wing base. We saw the consequences of that beginning to unfold last week when a Donald Trump-appointed judge in Texas ordered a key abortion drug taken off the shelves in a week's time nationwide, something that millions of pregnant folks use. Just last night, 2 more Trump-appointed judges, appellate judges, issued a complicated decision that allows part of that lawless ruling to stand. And now access to the medication will be limited. Again, because a few federal judges and their clerks working on a crash schedule in an emergency filing over the course of like 48 hours decided the Food and Drug Administration got it wrong in the 20 years they've been studying the drug. Now, the Department of Justice is asking the Supreme Court to take emergency action, the same court that overturned Roe versus Wade less than a year ago. Who knows what will happen? This case, as Vice President Kamala Harris said today, is a step towards a national abortion ban. Of course it is. Of course, that is exactly what the base of the anti-abortion movement wants. That is what they will demand of a Republican president, of any Republican politician, as soon as they take power, as much as the candidates don't want to tell you that.